Okay, so those of you that are here in the session, we're going to start in a couple of seconds. Make sure that you can see the chat and the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. And get those windows up if you want to use them. Pop a hi message in the chat if you want to, and say where you're tuning in from. That'd be nice to see kind of where everybody's from. I am in the southwest of the UK at the moment, in Devon. So yeah, pop your city or your county in the chat. I'll make it so that you can put stuff in the chat to everyone so we can see. But hi, Max from Northern Ireland. Hello, Dee from Kent. Ulster in Northern Ireland. Welcome, Max. Okay, there's a few more people coming in, but it's a bit slow. So I think we'll probably start properly in a second. Hello, Harini from Essex. Good to see you. Okay, so I think a few more will join in the next couple of minutes, but I think we'll start. We've got a bit of an introduction anyway, so they'll be able to pick that up. So welcome to today's biology lesson as part of the MyTutor online school. Today's lesson will be 1 hour, and the topic is human reproduction and the menstrual cycle. So this links into homeostasis and the hormonal control that we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks. My name's Charlotte. I've taken all of the biology lessons as part of the MyTutor online school so far. I studied conservation and biodiversity as a master's degree at the University of Exeter, and now I have graduated and I work for a charity working with farmers to help them farm in a way that's good for the environment, which is really cool. I've tutored over 150 lessons on MyTutor, and yeah, as I say, all of the biology lessons so far as part of the online school. Hello, Santati. I can see you have popped your hello in the chat as well. So today I'm working off one screen rather than two, which means that the chat and the Q&A, I'm going to have to close them and then bring them up again occasionally. So we'll have regular stops for questions, but normally I can kind of keep an eye as we go through, but we're going to have to do it in several different chunks today. So hopefully that will work well. But if you do put a question up and I don't answer straight away, we will be doing several stops, so don't worry too much. Okay, so last week we did a recap of diabetes. So how diabetes comes about, any treatment for diabetes, and then we looked at how the hormones that control diabetes, which is insulin and glucagon, are examples of how hormones can work as part of a negative feedback cycle, and how that fits in with homeostasis, which is our big topic at the moment. So we're looking at how we keep conditions in our bodies constant, which is what homeostasis means, maintaining an equilibrium in our bodies. So maintaining temperatures, maintaining blood glucose levels, maintaining water levels, all of those things. We're going to talk about those in more detail as well. But we have been looking at how we control those levels, and we've looked at the nervous system a few weeks ago now, and then we've looked at hormonal control and the different types of hormonal control that you can have. So insulin and glucagon were good examples of how hormones are used to control blood glucose levels. And now we're going to look at how hormones are involved in reproduction and the menstrual cycle in females as well. So a lot of reproduction and in particular the menstrual cycle are controlled by hormones, and they're fantastic examples of how hormones are used to make really kind of minute changes in the body, and really quite complicated controls that you would normally assume the nervous system would do. But actually the hormones here are capable of some quite sophisticated controls. So that's what we're going to go through today. Any questions about the content, pop them in the Q&A. Any general stuff, like a few of you are popping messages in about where you're from, pop those in the chat. And we'll keep the chat kind of open for discussion. Today's is a kind of topic that I know can make some people feel awkward and can be difficult to talk about, but do feel free to pop stuff in the chat and we will go through them as we go along. Okay, so hormones and human reproduction. So part of growing up is going through puberty, and puberty is that period of time, and it can be from between the age of 8 if you're girls to 14. For guys it tends to be a little bit later, between 9 and 15, and it's when our bodies take on their adult forms and reproductive organs become active. That's the kind of definition of puberty. And when we're talking about reproductive organs becoming active, we're all born with primary sexual characteristics. And usually these are ovaries or testes. So ovaries in females or testes in males. And the hormones released by these reproductive organs control the development of secondary sexual characteristics. And that's puberty as well, as that development of secondary sexual characteristics. So we'll go through how this differs for girls and boys in a second. And I wanted to point out as well that we're going to be talking a lot about sex today. And by sex, we mean male or female. And that is, of course, different to gender, which is how you perceive yourself. So I wanted to kind of make that point at the beginning, that we're going to mention the word sex and that is slightly different from gender. So hopefully that will come across. So we've got a couple of diagrams here from BBC Bitesize, just labelling the different parts of the reproductive organs of males at the top and then females at the bottom. So let's kind of have a bit of a better look at those and talk about how secondary sexual characteristics differ between males and females. So we're going to talk about males first. So for males, boys, the reproductive hormone is testosterone. So that's the hormone that we're looking at that starts to be released during puberty for boys. And that's produced in the testes. So if we have a look at the diagram here, you can see the bladder and the glands are at the top of the sperm duct. You also have the urethra for wee inside the penis, and then the testes are at the bottom within the scrotum. So the testes are where sperm are produced, and then they move up the sperm duct and are released from the penis during reproduction. And sperm are the male gamete. So right at the beginning, we talked about different types of cell. And we talked about animal cells and plant cells. And we didn't really cover gamete cells, but gamete cells have one difference from other main cells in that they have half of the genetic material as usual. So that then when a sperm joins with an egg, they have one complete copy of genetic material. So during puberty, when testosterone is released, and that's also produced in the testes. So testosterone is released. And testosterone is released throughout life for boys, which is something, again, that's a bit different between males and females, so we'll talk about that in a second. But testosterone and sperm can be produced throughout life for males. And the secondary sex characteristics that develop during puberty are a growth spurt. And again, there's a slight difference to when this happens between girls and boys. So I remember when I was at school, suddenly I was getting a bit taller, and I was definitely taller than most of the boys. And then suddenly they all had a growth spurt and got much, much taller than me. I'm still quite short. There's pubic hair that starts to grow, underarm hair, facial hair, larynx gets bigger and voices break, and external genitals and skin darken. And the testes grow and start producing sperm, as we talked about. Shoulders and chest broaden, and the brain matures as well. So this is going into adulthood. So that's for males. Lots and lots of changes there. A lot of them quite visible, a lot of them not so much. So let's have a look at how that differs for women. Okay, so for females, we have a different hormone that begins to be released at puberty. And that hormone is called estrogen. You see it here. Let me pull up a highlighter and I can highlight it for you. Estrogen is produced in the ovaries. And it's estrogen that triggers those female secondary sex characteristics in the same way that testosterone does for males. So if we have a look at the diagram, you can see that ovaries are there's one either side here of the uterus. And then we have a tube similar to the sperm duct, but it's called the oviduct. So estrogen and also eggs develop in the ovaries and pass down the oviduct and then into the uterus. So the uterus is kind of triangular shaped, and it's the lining of that that's prepared during the menstrual cycle for pregnancy that we're going to talk about a bit more in a second. The cervix is the entrance to the uterus. They've also labelled the bladder there as well, which is just in front. The urethra as well, and then the vagina is below the cervix there. So a completely different arrangement, but some similarity in that you can see the symmetrical arrangement there. The ovaries either side of the uterus in the same way that the testes are either side of the penis. Okay, so female secondary sex characteristics have some similarities to males. So again, there's a growth spurt, and we said that that happens slightly earlier generally than for males. Again, hair under the arms and pubic hair, no facial hair though. Breasts develop, external genitals grow and skin darkens, the same as in males. And also in females, we have this slight repositioning of fat. And so we call that sort of gaining curves in a way. So generally fat is repositioned and you get a little more kind of around the hips. Again, the brain matures the same as with males. And mature eggs start to form every month in the ovaries. So we said that the ovaries is where estrogen is released from, and it's also where mature eggs start to form. So eggs are the female gametes. So sperm for males, eggs for females. And each of those have half the usual complement of genetic material. The uterus becomes active and menstruation begins as well as part of puberty, part of those development of secondary sex characteristics. And again, we'll talk about that kind of in more detail in a second, so don't worry if you're a bit unsure about the sequence that happens there. A little note here on female fertility. So we mentioned that for males, sperm and testosterone are produced throughout life. Well, for females, at birth, the ovaries already contain all of the eggs that a woman will have. So after puberty, when they start to be released, one, sometimes two, are released each month for about 35 to 40 years, except when you're pregnant. That's the only exception. When those eggs run out, women go through the menopause and can no longer have children. So the menopause is a decrease in fertility. There's no longer any eggs available to develop and be released each month. And so women can no longer have children after the menopause. And even in the lead up to the menopause, there's a marked kind of reduction in fertility. So it can be more difficult to have children later on. After the menopause, that's it for menstruation. So no children, but also no periods. So that's kind of an important difference there between males and females. Okay, so a couple of quite crowded slides there. I'm going to pull up the chat and the Q&A and have a quick look through questions. So if you have any. Okay. Okay, so running through the Q&A, there's someone asking about lesson times, thinking that they would be at 3 till 4 this week. Always keep an eye on the timetable. Lessons are at 2 till 3. And that was when MyTutor had a poll a couple of weeks ago. That was the most popular time for having them. So they are at 2 till 3 at the moment, which I appreciate for some of you might conflict with when you're at school, but might possibly fit into lunch breaks. I know there's a couple of people that tune in during their lunch breaks as well. Okay, so just running through the Q&A. Is it dangerous for puberty to start at 15? No, not at all. So different people develop at different rates. So it's not at all unsafe. It's just a bit later than some others, and everyone does it at different times and does different parts of it at different times as well, and it's different for everyone. So no, definitely not dangerous at all. When you have menstrual cramps, is it bad to have paracetamol in order to reduce pain? No, not at all. In fact, paracetamol, as far as I know, is what's recommended for menstrual cramps. So, and different people have different levels of pain according to menstrual cramps as well. So if you need paracetamol, then go for it. If it allows you to go along your day in the way that you need to, then it's completely fine to take it. Does an acne start during puberty, and does everyone get acne? So yes, acne is often something that happens to people during puberty. So almost everyone gets spots during puberty, and it's because there's lots of changes going on and your skin gets quite greasy. So it's completely normal, everyone gets spots. Acne is when you have lots more spots. So acne is a kind of medical condition, and it can be treated if it's particularly bad. Most of the time it just goes away by itself, because it's part of puberty. So everything settles down, your hormones settle down once you've gone through puberty, and the acne generally will go away. So not everyone gets acne, everyone gets spots. You'd be very, very lucky if you didn't get very many spots. So yes, it's not unusual at all. If it's really, really bad, then you can talk to your doctor. You know, if it's affecting you wanting to go out, if you feel, you know, like it might be affecting your mental health, then well worth talking to your doctor about it. What do I mean skin darkens? So basically what I mean by that is that there's a darkening around kind of external genitalia. So around the scrotum, the labia of the vagina, they tend to darken through puberty. So that's kind of what I mean by that. Is it bad to start menstruation really late? No, not at all. Again, everyone develops at different times, so it happens differently to everyone, and it's not just influenced by the levels of hormones in your body as well. It's influenced by diet, by lifestyle, lots and lots of different things. So don't worry at all if it's just later than others. That's okay. It's no problem. If you're getting really worried about it, then definitely, you know, check with your doctor. That's fine. But no, it happens differently to everyone. Oh dear. Okay. When do most girls get their period? Kind of linked to the last question, it happens at different times for everyone. In general, it's between the age of 8 and 15 or 16. So as someone was saying about their friend, that's quite late, but it's not abnormal at all. And it can be, I mean, 8, I would say, is quite early, but there are some people who do, you know, no problem there. If you start later, do you grow taller as you have more time to grow? Ooh, good question. I don't think so. I think how tall you grow is influenced by lots of other factors as well. So no, I don't think you grow taller because you start puberty later. Isn't acne when oil in the skin mixes with sweat, which has dirt trapped inside and opens pores and causes spots? That's kind of the definition of how spots are caused. And you just have particularly oily skin when you're going through puberty in general. So like you say, it's more likely that the pores will get that kind of slight infection, which is what a spot is. But generally, they just clear themselves up. It's very normal. Quite often, so spots are influenced again by lots of other things. Diet can influence them. How stressed you are can come through it as well. You know, whether you've been out in the sun and sweating down your face all day, that can influence them as well. So it's not just puberty. Again, someone asking, did I have a lot of acne? I didn't, no. I was very lucky. But I did have quite a few friends who had it to varying degrees. A couple of them went to their doctors about it, but most of them, they did just clear up. And everyone's got it, you know, it's not, it wasn't a big deal. What in our bodies causes these changes? Well, it's the production of those hormones. So we talked about testosterone and estrogen, and it's the release of those hormones that triggers those changes in the body. So it's our transition to adulthood, to becoming capable of reproduction. Oh. Someone asking about discharge that happens to girls before their period. Why does that happen? And I think that's just your body kind of starting to prepare. So your uterus is always there. So there's always going to be some kind of stuff coming from it. There's also lots of reactions that happen in the vagina as well. The vagina is quite it's a very acidic environment, and it acts as a barrier to germs in there as well. So sometimes some discharge can be from some reactions in there too. Does water help with spots? Certainly, like, you know, washing your face morning and evening, that can help with spots as well, but it differs for everyone. And what would happen if we didn't go through puberty? That's another really good question. We would never have any children, so we would never reproduce if we didn't go through puberty. Oh, sorry. Does drinking water help with spots? Yes, so keeping hydrated, keeping your skin hydrated and really healthy, that can help too. Okay, when this lesson is done in schools, they always split up the boys and girls for some reason. Okay, yes, so in schools that generally does happen. It kind of depends on your school as well. I'm pretty sure we weren't split up, so I think it does depend. And generally that's just to make people more comfortable. So some people as well, for their cultural or religious beliefs, wouldn't want to learn about this stuff in the presence of the other sex as well. So sometimes it can be helpful for that too. I mean, we've put this on and it's voluntary to come in here, and I hope you guys are finding this useful. So there we go. We'll talk more about menstrual cramps in a second. And I think that's all of the questions. Really good questions. Guys, keep them coming. Okay, we'll do another question stop in a second. We're going to go on and we're going to talk about the menstrual cycle. So quite a few questions were about that as well. So let's talk about it. Okay, so we're going to talk about the menstrual cycle in the context of its control by hormones, because that's kind of how this fits into the syllabus. Feel free to ask other questions as well, and we'll go through the general stuff about it too. So each month, and this is for females, so this is if you have a uterus, this will happen, and ovaries. So each month, eggs begin to mature in the ovary, and remember, we're born females with a certain amount of eggs in ovaries. And after puberty, after estrogen has started to be released, eggs begin to mature in the ovary. And the other thing that happens is that the lining of the uterus thickens, ready for pregnancy. So this diagram here shows the thickness of the womb lining. And you can also see along here the kind of sequence events for the menstrual cycle. So let's do this. Well, the rough kind of idea is that every 28 days an egg is released, and that's called ovulation. Rubbish highlighting there, sorry everyone. And if that egg isn't fertilized, which a lot of the time it isn't, then 14 days later, the lining of the uterus is shed along with the egg. And this takes the form of a period. So it looks like blood that's being released from the body. And it's just the lining of the womb. It's not made up of that much blood in reality, it's mostly womb lining. But again, differs for different people, and a period is different for every woman. So, you know, if yours is quite heavy, that's fine. If it's light, it's fine. If you haven't started yet, that's fine. There is no rules here, really. So if you look at the cycle from 0 to 28 days, the first 5 days are the old egg leaving the body in the menstrual flow. So we start with roughly 5 days of period. And again, they can be less, they can be more, differs for lots of different people. This is when menstrual cramps will happen, if you get menstrual cramps. And again, not everyone does. It varies very, very much. So some people might get menstrual cramps so bad that they almost spend all of those 5 days in bed. And at that point, there are things that doctors can do to help you, because obviously if you need to do that every month, it can be quite detrimental to the other things in your life. But then there are others where they just have a few hours of pain. Some people get no pain at all. Okay, at the same time, a new egg is starting to mature in the ovary, so between 0 and 12 days. Between 12 and 16 days, that egg is released, and we call that ovulation. That egg is released, it travels through that, do you remember that tube we saw, that oviduct? So it's traveling to the womb, to the uterus. And then it takes a few days to get there. It's a long way for an egg. And then between 20 and 28 days, that egg will have arrived at the womb, and it sort of wants to attach to the lining of the uterus. And if it's fertilized, then it would, what we could say, implant into the lining of the uterus. So if it had met with the sperm. But if it doesn't, then the cycle starts again. So after 28 days, that egg is in the womb, it hasn't been fertilized, and our bodies break down that lining of the womb and release that womb lining and that old egg as a period. So that's what happens over that 28 days. So technically it's not quite a month. It's a 28-day cycle instead. Okay, this is a complicated slide. Bear with me. We will go through it step by step, and I will leave it up for a while afterwards so that you can copy what you need to copy. In fact, if anything, I think I'm going to decrease. Hopefully we can try and get it all on one page. So there are 4 hormones involved in the control of the menstrual cycle. And this is what I mean in that it's a really fantastic example. I understand that if you're boys, this doesn't apply to you, but it is a really good example of how hormones can be involved in some quite specific control in the body. And it's something good to know. Half of the population has the menstrual cycle, so it's worth knowing about. Okay, so we're going to talk through the hormones one by one. And you can see I've put a diagram here on the right-hand side that shows those different levels of hormone in the blood, and also the change in the uterus lining as well. So this is the same diagram as you saw on the last slide. So this is days 1 to 28 of the cycle. So you can see how these change. Okay, so hormone number 1 is called follicle stimulating hormone, FSH. FSH is released by the pituitary gland. Now, we've covered the pituitary gland before. It's a little gland that is present in the brain. And as well as secreting hormones, so as well as secreting hormones that act directly on parts of the body, it also secretes messenger hormones as well. It's kind of the master gland that controls a lot of the other glands that release hormones. But FSH is one of the direct acting hormones. So follicle stimulating hormone is released by the pituitary gland, and it directly makes eggs mature in their follicles in the ovary. I haven't included a diagram of a follicle here, but it's basically a little bit on top of the ovary, and it's where eggs develop finally. So it directly makes eggs mature in their follicles. So you're born with eggs, but then they have to do kind of some final stages in the follicle. And you can see that in the top part of the diagram here. So this is changes in the ovary, and you can see the egg maturing there. FSH also has an indirect role. So it also stimulates the ovaries to produce estrogen. So it works in the follicle in the ovary to help eggs mature, and it helps the ovaries themselves produce estrogen. We're going to talk about what estrogen does later on. We've already talked about one function of estrogen, which is during puberty, where it stimulates the secondary sex characteristics. But here it has more roles as well. So we have FSH, which you can see as the green line here. And then also LH. LH stands for luteinizing hormone. There is no good way to remember luteinizing. That one is one that you need to copy out several times until you can spell it, apart from anything else. I had a hard time spelling it on here. Luteinizing hormone, or LH, is also released from the pituitary gland. And it's LH that stimulates ovulation. Ovulation is the release of that egg. So you can see ovulation in the top of the diagram here. And you can see LH there, and you can see that peak in LH around ovulation. So that was hormone number 2. Hormone number 3 is estrogen. We've kind of talked about estrogen a little bit, in that we said it was released in response to FSH earlier on. Estrogen stimulates the lining of the uterus to grow after menstruation. So it's estrogen, you can see it here, increasing before ovulation, and it's preparing the uterus for that egg that is released in ovulation. It's basically making a big bed, a big comfy bed for that egg in the uterus. So it's a nice thick lining. Those high levels of estrogen also inhibit FSH and LH. So you can see they're staying quite low while estrogen is rising here. And that's basically the body saying, hold on, need to make the bed first before we release the egg. So estrogen, after a period where the lining of the womb is released, estrogen increases. That means that the lining of the womb is thickened. You can see that there. Then you get this spike in LH, which is ovulation, and you can see that estrogen dies down a bit there as well, because the bed is already prepared. Finally, the 4th hormone is progesterone. Progesterone is secreted by the empty egg follicle after ovulation. So the egg has been released, and then this 4th hormone comes in. It helps to maintain that uterus lining. So through this section here, days 14 to 28. So it keeps that sort of bed for the egg, that thick uterus lining, nice and thick. And it again inhibits both FSH and LH, so trying to stop any more eggs being released before we've got rid of this one if we need to. Okay, so those are the 4. And if we talk through it, say from the beginning to the end of the cycle, so days 1 to 5 are the period, so getting rid of the last uterus lining and the last egg if it wasn't fertilized. You can see you've got a little bit of a spike in FSH there because it's causing the egg to mature, the next egg to mature in the follicles, in the ovaries. LH is still quite low, don't need that yet because we're not ready to release. Then between 5 and 14 days, you get this spike in estrogen being released from the ovaries themselves. The estrogen is preparing the womb lining, the uterus lining, making sure that's nice and thick. You can see it building up again here. Then at roughly day 14, the estrogen drops and ovulation takes place along with a corresponding spike in LH. So remember, luteinizing hormone is the one that's to do with ovulation. And then after ovulation, you get a slight spike there in estrogen because you're maintaining the lining of the womb. A lot of help there from progesterone between days 14 and 28, keeping that lining there just in case fertilization takes place, and then pregnancy would carry on. But if it isn't fertilized, then at the end of that 28 days, you've got relatively low levels of them all, apart from FSH, which is starting to prepare the next egg. And again, a period takes place. So the lining of the uterus is then broken down. Okay. Let's leave that slide there. And I'll pop up the Q&A again and answer any questions. Okay, so going from where we were before, does having ovarian cancer mean you can't have children? Ooh, good question. That very much depends on the stage of the cancer and the treatment that is needed to cure it. I'm not 100% sure on the specifics, but obviously chemotherapy can have lots of different effects on the body. I don't know whether it has an effect on your fertility. If the cancer did get to the stage where the ovaries needed to be removed, then yes, it would stop you having children because there would be nowhere for the eggs to develop. So it very much depends. Do menstrual cramps occur if you are weaker? No. How weak you are has no bearing at all on the strength of your menstrual cramps. They are just different for everyone. There's lots of other things involved as well. So our bodies are very complicated when it comes to reproduction. So it's all of these hormones, plus lots of other factors as well, some of them environmental as well as genetic. So lots of different things there. And that's why women all suffer from different levels of menstrual cramps. It definitely doesn't mean that you are weak if you have bad menstrual cramps. It's just one of those things. Does exercise make you grow taller as it stimulates growth hormone? Good question. I'm not sure. I don't think it would have a huge effect. Exercise makes us strong. It develops our muscles, and it keeps us healthy as well because it exercises those muscles, including our heart, and we need our heart to pump oxygen around our body, and it's all a bit of a cycle. So I don't think it has a huge effect, if it has any effect at all. Someone else saying that, is it bad if menstruation happens early, every 17 days? Again, it differs for everyone. So it's roughly a 28-day cycle, but there is some variation there as well. I don't think that would necessarily be particularly abnormal. If you're worried, again, don't be afraid to phone your doctor about this. So you can always ask to speak to a nurse if you find that, more comfortable. Any of those is fine. So yeah, it does vary a lot. Why don't you feel the egg moving in your body? That's a really good question. I think they're just so small. So they are quite small. And I think that the ovaries and the oviducts are designed to be big enough for those eggs, if you see what I mean. So I don't think there's any difficulty with them passing through that would cause you any discomfort or anything like that. Is the egg moving what causes the cramps? No. What causes the cramps is a really good question, actually. So cramps I think are kind of the body's response to those different hormone levels. That's a really good question. That's worth a Google. What specifically causes the cramps? And I'm not sure what the answer is. So definitely worth a Google there. What does luteinizing mean? So luteinizing, in the context of this, is the word for that hormone, luteinizing hormone. The word is derived, I think, from Latin, and I think lutein is either to do with eggs or the moon. I can't remember which, but that's where the word comes from, is the Latin for either egg or the moon. I think it's egg, actually. So luteinizing hormone, because it stimulates the release of the egg in ovulation. Okay, good question from there as well. Just curious to know if these sessions will carry on as the website has changed. These sessions are carrying on, so don't worry. There has been a change in the website, but that's MyTutor kind of adapting to the changes that are happening. So some people are going back to school, some others, and they needed a different web system. So the website's changed, but these sessions are still going to be taking place from 2 till 3 on a Monday. Okay, last week the host said they would do the lessons at 3 till 4. I'm not sure about that. So keep an eye on the timetable. When MyTutor did the poll about when lessons would take place, this was the most popular time. So although I understand that it won't work for everyone, this is the session that seemed to work for most people. But I appreciate it is quite difficult to fit it in at lunch. So definitely email MyTutor if it's not working for you. Okay, so if your immune system is weaker, does that mean you don't have periods? I don't know whether your immune system affects whether you have periods or not. One thing that I do know that affects periods is your diet and how much weight you have. If women go through an extreme loss of weight, and I mean becoming anorexic, that kind of level of extreme loss of weight, that can affect whether you have periods or not, because when your weight gets that low, and that is very dangerously low, then your body just doesn't have the resources to go through a period. At that point, reproduction for your body is no longer a priority. At that point, your body's just trying to survive. So your weight can have a big effect on your period if it gets very dangerously low. And that's not just being thin. Some people are just naturally thin. But that's if you become, for example, very anorexic. Does your... keep filing through the questions too fast on my mouse. Here we go. Does your period ever stop, or is it something you will have forever once you have it? Yes, periods do stop. So do you remember a couple of slides ago, think it was here, where we had that note about fertility. So women will have periods every month, unless you're pregnant, for 35 to 40 years. After that 35 to 40 years, you go through something called the menopause. And the menopause literally means a pause on menstruation. So menstruation stops at the menopause. And after that, you don't have periods, but you're also no longer fertile. So you can no longer conceive a child after the menopause. Another question about exercise and growth hormone. Can grow about 4 inches taller a year from exercise, according to, the name just says anonymous, but according to someone's science teacher. Okay, that's interesting. So that's something that we kind of haven't covered yet and that I hadn't really looked into. So apparently, yeah, exercise does make a difference because you produce more growth hormones. You can grow taller through that. Again, worth checking that. During periods, does your body require more energy? That's a good question. I think slightly more. And for some people, obviously, your body needs to replace some of the stuff that's being lost through a period if there's a lot of blood involved. But in general, not really. You tend to feel differently. There's lots of hormones, so you tend to feel a bit down and a bit lacking in energy and a bit bloated. So in some respects, yes, your body might require more energy just to get over those feelings of being a bit kind of overworked. And I'm not sure how much of that is physical and how much of that is mental. Cramps are caused by the uterus contracting to expel its lining. Well, that makes sense. And I think they're triggered just through those hormones. So those hormones also have an effect on the muscles surrounding the uterus, I think. Okay, so it was on an English webinar. People are saying about 3 till 4. So Bola from MyTutor is going to have a chat towards the end of this session, so it'd be worth asking her then as well. We'll check that later. Does immune system affect cramps? No, I don't think so. I think cramps are separate from the immune system. I don't know what weight is classified as anorexic for a 13-year-old, I'm afraid. Can you not have sex after your period stops? Yes, you can have sex after your period stops. You just wouldn't conceive a child from it. Is sex required for a child, or does everyone need to have it for a child? So that's kind of a complicated question. Yes, in principle, sex is required to have a child. However, next week we're going to talk about things like IVF, which of course is a different way of conceiving. So let's park that question and we will talk about that next Monday. Okay, good questions, everyone. So I think what we'll do is we're going to do a couple of exam questions about this one as well. So I wanted to run through these. If you want to answer these in the chat, then go for it. I'll give you a couple of seconds to do that now for these ones. So the human body produces many hormones. Question A, part 1, is what is a hormone, for 1 mark. Part 2, name an organ that produces a hormone, for 1 mark. Should be able to do that one for today. Part 3 is how a hormone is transported to their target organs. Again, 1 mark for that one. So this is just general knowledge about hormones so far. Answers in the chat if you want to. Good one, Olivia. That's one there. If you don't want to, no problem. I'll give you 10 more seconds if you do want to pop them in the chat, and then we'll move on and have a look at the answers. So these are very kind of general questions, 1 mark. These are quite simple, short questions that you might get in an exam. I would always recommend underlining the keywords. So what is a hormone? They're kind of all keywords. Name an organ that produces a hormone, and how a hormone is transported. Those would be the keywords I would say there. Well done, Saima, as well. Okay, let's move on to the answers here. So I've put the answer straight from the mark scheme here. So hopefully that would be helpful, because I think you guys probably don't often get to see a mark scheme. So for 1 mark, for the answer to the question, what is a hormone? You can have any one from these 4 answers. So there's some flexibility for this question. So hormones are a chemical messenger. They're a chemical or substance produced by the gland. They're a chemical or substance that's transported to or acting on a target organ. Or they're a chemical or substance that controls body functions. For part 2, which was name an organ that produces a hormone, you could have any gland or named endocrine gland. We did go through the endocrine glands, I think, last week. So if you need to brush up on those, I think that session is up on YouTube. So have a look on the MyTutor online school and you can see it through there. So examples from today would be the testes or the ovaries. Those are both endocrine glands that produce hormones. How are hormones transported to their target organs? So they're transported in the blood. You could say in the blood plasma if you wanted to be specific, or if you want to be a bit less specific, you can say in the circulatory system or the bloodstream. So again, loads of different levels that would be accepted for this question. Olivia's saying that this came up in her exam. Oh, in her exam mock. Okay, well, some good revision here about that one. Okay, then I wanted to include this 3-mark question, which goes through exactly what we've talked about today. So the question is describe, that's the command word there, how the hormones FSH, estrogen, and LH, so that's 3 of those 4 hormones that we talked about that control the menstrual cycle, are involved in the control of the menstrual cycle. 3 marks here. 3 marks, 3 hormones. So if you're thinking about how to structure the answer to this question for 3 marks, to make sure that you get those 3 marks, think about having 1 sentence per hormone for how they're involved in the control of the menstrual cycle. And hopefully that would tick all the boxes to get you the 3 marks. And if we have a look at the mark scheme, we can see that it is arranged exactly like that. So notice those differences between, or those connections between the question and the number of marks awarded. It can quite often give you a good idea of what you need to do. So in the mark scheme, we've got that FSH stimulates estrogen production and egg maturation. We talked about that today. 1 mark for saying what FSH does. Estrogen inhibits FSH. And you could also say that estrogen stimulates LH or builds up the uterine lining. And we talked about today, we talked about how estrogen stops the FSH because you don't want the egg maturing too soon, but its main function is to build up that uterine lining, so preparing the uterus for the egg. And then LH stimulates the egg release. Remember, L stands for luteinizing, which is derived from the Latin for egg, as far as I remember. That may not be quite right, but as far as I remember, that's where it comes from. And again, notice here in the mark scheme where it says, except LH inhibits estrogen. So you could say that. Except that LH controls or stimulates the growth of corpus luteum. That isn't relevant to the particular specification that we're talking here, which is AQA. corpus luteum is one of the stages that the egg goes through during production. So you learn more about that at A-level than at GCSE. And you cannot say production of egg. So this is a reminder to be really careful with wording on questions like this. You need to be very specific that it stimulates egg release, i.e. ovulation, but not the production of the egg. Remember, the eggs, we're born with eggs as females, but they are matured, so they finish their development in response to FSH. They aren't produced. Okay, let's have one last look at the Q&A. And then I think Bola would like to talk to you about small group sessions. Are there apps I recommend for revision? That's a really good question. In short, I don't know of any in particular. I always recommend BBC Bitesize for revision because I think their diagrams and the way that they set out information is really great. But as for apps on your phone, there aren't any in particular that I recommend. But actually, Bola, do you want to jump in here? Because you might know of some.
Hello, sorry, good afternoon. Just had some troubles unmuting myself there. So apps that can help students. So again, I'm not, I think beyond the ones that you already said, Charlotte, I'm not as knowledgeable, maybe Bitesize. Yeah, the others, please, I apologize. It's been a couple of years since I've had to find apps for revision, but yeah, Bitesize. There are other like study tools that don't necessarily give you the content, but are very good for helping you structure your time. Yeah. Charlotte, are there any more that you can recommend?
I don't think so. I mean, as far as websites go, I always say BBC Bitesize or Physics and Maths Tutor is another really good website for revision because you can arrange questions by topic. Right. And they have just released some new revision content, but I don't know whether that's available as an app on your phone. That's the only thing. So I'm sorry not to be more helpful there. I'll see if I can have a look before next week.
Amazing. Do you want me to speak a bit more about the small groups now?
Yeah, go for it.
So some of you that have already attended some of the sessions last week may have heard me talk about these small groups tutorials before. Basically, the point is that we at MyTutor also offer smaller groups where you can basically you're in a group of around 6 students. 6 students is the maximum that can belong to each group. And because they're a more intimate setting in that there's just 6 of you within the webinar with the tutor, you're able to really dive a bit deeper into some of these topics. Your tutor can tailor the topics to kind of suit your pace. And yeah, it's more intimate, it's a bit more personalized. And they're 6-week sessions, 6 sessions spread over 6 weeks. So you have 1 hour sessions every week, just as you do with these large group tutorials, essentially. I have posted on the chat a link that you can all click on to find out a bit more about these small groups if you'd like. I know we have physics kicking off this week, GCSE and A-level, so I think there's still a chance to maybe sign up if you'd like. But yeah, that's pretty much it from me. Apart from that, obviously we also do offer one-on-one tuition, which is very personalized. It's very much you and the tutor, and you have tutors such as the amazing Charlotte here that you can work with, or other tutors on the site. Again, if you want to find out a bit more, just go on mytutor.co.uk where you can see a bit more about that. Thank you.
The other thing, Bola, is there's quite a few questions about the time moving till 3 till 4. I don't know whether that's been decided for any of the other subjects or what was going on about that. So I don't know whether you have any more up-to-date news about a possible time change.
No, not yet. I think this is the second time it's been raised. I think the first was in chemistry. What I may do is, starting from maybe Wednesday
you're
or so.
breaking up a bit there.
Sorry, is this better? Hello?
Yeah, that's much better. Sorry.
Fantastic. Oh, it's fine. So starting from maybe Wednesday or so, I might start polling again just to see what people's views are and what time works best. But yeah, I'll look into it definitely, and hopefully from Wednesday we'll be able to capture a bit more, have a better understanding of what time frame works for people.
Okay, so hopefully that answers all of your questions there at the time as well. It sounds as though you will have another opportunity to have an input as to what time works best for you as well. Okay, so I think that's all we've got time for today. Thanks for all of your great questions about a topic that can be or can feel quite difficult to ask questions about. So thank you for that. Next week, we are going to talk about fertility. So we're going to talk a little bit more about IVF, as we said in answer to one of the questions earlier. And we're also going to talk about contraception too. So definitely tune in next Monday, 2 till 3 again. And we will go from there. I think that's everything for this week. Have a lovely week, everyone, and see you next Monday. Bye.